let's just start a little bit with bed fishing and kind of as a whole, or what you're trying to do and why those fish, why you're able to catch them anyway to start with. The reason you're able to catch them is because they don't have hands. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the Technique of the Month video for April. April is a fantastic month in my opinion. We get to celebrate Easter this month. That's always something exciting. As a Christian, I always love getting to celebrate Easter. Bass fishing is usually typically pretty good, and April is turkey hunting season. So lots of great things going on in the month of April, no doubt about it. And April for bass fishing, to me, that when I think April, I think spawn. I think of the fish spawning, and we've covered a lot of different ways with the Technique of the Month video. We've done done some other standalone videos of catching spawning fish and stuff. But it's a fun way. It can be a very, very fun way to fish. And especially with what we do with Major League Fishing now, with catch, weigh, release, man, we're not even having to take those fish off their bed necessarily. We catch them, weigh them, let them go. You oftentimes just watch them swim right back over there. So it seems as though it's no harm, no foul to them. Catch them, pierce their lip, weigh them, send them right back. They can take care of their babies. So, but I love bed fishing. Bed fishing has been a good thing for me personally. We've been in a lot of tournaments around that time of the year that have done well for me. One of my biggest wins, I guess, would have been the heavy hitters down at Palestine. Bed fishing, caught most of those fish sight fishing in that particular event. But I enjoy it. I can remember growing up and being fascinated by guys like Alton Jones and Guido Hibden and some of those guys who were really well-known bed fishermen early on. Dean Rojas, catching the 45-pound stringer down at Toho like he did back in the day. Those type of events were just mind-blowing to me, growing up in East Tennessee, because truthfully around here, it's not something we do a lot of. Actually, sight fishing isn't something that you can do a lot of in East Tennessee. Douglas and Cherokee, obviously where I fished the most growing up, those lakes are rising 3 to 6 inches a day in the springtime. So a fish pulls up and makes a bed, well, you can't even see it the next day. So it was just, again, not something that we truly ever did a lot of sight fishing. On Fort Loudon, oftentimes the fish spawn just a little bit deeper, and the water's, especially back then, was pretty off-colored. So again, you just never really did a ton of sight fishing around here growing up. So when I started traveling and fishing professionally, going other places, that was when I really started getting a dose into sight fishing, and and having to learn how to do that and to be effective with it, to be efficient with it, and to be able to get those fish to bite. So a little bit of what I want to talk about today is really two baits that I use a lot sight fishing, two techniques kind of, and kind of how they complement each other. But before even filming this, we were actually going back and watching one of our videos that we had shot in Texas a few years ago on an off day, and we actually did a lot of underwater footage with that particular day, using a Tokyo rig and using a Wacky rig, and kind of how they complement each other and different scenarios for each one and things. But really going back and watching some of that video, I encourage you all to check it out. It's really neat showing underwater of those fish biting baits, reacting to the baits, all those kind of things. Because it's one thing when you're watching a guy talking about what you can see under the water, and the fish is doing this and the fish is doing that, but actually watching that fish, at its eye level do some of that is where you can. I learned a lot going back and watching it myself, so definitely encourage y'all to check it out. But let's just start a little bit with bed fishing and kind of as a whole, or what you're trying to do and why those fish, why you're able to catch them anyway to start with. The reason you're able to catch them is because they don't have hands. So you put a bait in there. The only way for that fish to remove that bait from its bed is with its mouth. So that is why you catch them when they are actually spawning. It's because they don't have hands. If they had hands, you would never catch one in the mouth when they're actually spawning, because they aren't trying to eat your bait. They're not actually trying to eat it to digest it. It's truly a defensive kind of mechanism to get it out of there. Would a fish fully digest something, a bluegill or a crawdad or something? It's kind of hard for me to think that they wouldn't. If it came in their bed, it's nutrition, and why are they not going to ingest it and actually eat it? I have to think that they probably would. I think they don't truly eat our baits oftentimes when we're bed fishing, because they know it's not real. They're just trying to pick it up, and then they'll carry it over, and then they blow it back out. That's because they know it's not real. It's just in their space where they don't want it. Does that mean to say that, a live crawdad actually crawled across their bed? They're probably going to eat it and swallow it. Why wouldn't they? Again, I don't know. So maybe somebody who's a scientist, a fisheries biologist, could actually tell you that no, they absolutely do not ingest anything. I don't know. They don't leave their bed to go feed. I do agree with that. But if something swims across it, hard for me to think they're going to spit a steak out. I've never spit a steak out. So that's just a little side note on that. But yes, for what we're trying to do, we're trying to elicit a defensive strike out of that fish. So you want to think that first and foremost. And a big part of that too, it's a defensive strike, but the fish being as little aware of your presence as possible is to your advantage, okay? A really, really aggressive fish, it's not as big of a deal. A really wary fish, it's absolutely a big deal. So, there's some fish that, man, you can fish for them 2 foot off the trolling motor, it doesn't matter. Other fish, if you're within, 20 or 30 feet of it, that fish is just going to wander off the bed and not want to stay up there whatsoever. So every fish is a little different, for whatever reason, their personality, their life experience, I don't know, whatever is going on with them, every one of them is a little bit different. So just, reading that fish as you're coming up to it, if you're able to see it at any distance, or oftentimes what I'm trying to do, even in a tournament setting, like I'm going pretty fast and I'm looking and I'm throwing something up ahead of the boat, probably a wacky worm. I'm looking for fish. Well, then if I see one, instead of trying to like stop the boat really fast and hope that I'm far enough back once the boat stops, I'm just going to keep trucking. And I'm going to look exactly where it is, because I'm not worried so much that if I scare that fish off the bed the first time. Like if I basically run it over and I scare it off, as long as I don't muddy the water up and make it harder for me to see, I don't care if I bump that fish off of its bed, because if it's not going to come back really quick anyway, you know what? I probably wasn't going to catch it, truthfully. Like it really didn't matter. So I'm going to be going at a pretty good clip, just casting up ahead of the boat, trying to pick off really aggressive fish while looking for fish that, hopefully I get the boat almost to them before they, ease off of the bed. And by the time the back of the boat gets past them, if the water's clear enough, I can see them coming back to it. That's a fish I can catch, okay? That fish that I see a white spot up there and I'm like 30 feet from it and the fish dart, swims off and is just drifting out into the abyss, don't even waste your time circling back. Like, might come back 4 hours later, might come back tomorrow. Maybe that fish will be locked on more. But that one that drifts off like that, that's not a fish you need to waste any time on. That one that looks like it wants to eat your trolling motor prop, that's the one that you want to make sure you see exactly where it is. Give it just a couple minutes, circle back around, and make a cast right there at it. Those are the ones that, that they're set up and the attitude is right on to be able to catch pretty quickly. So, that just really trying to read that body language before you've ever even made a cast at those fish is a big part of picking out the ones that are going to be catchable versus the ones that, you're going to end up spending a lot of time on and maybe not ever catch, or that you have to spend a long, long time on to ever get to bite. So for presentation, really, I think of having a couple different things. For one, like I said, I'm usually I'm looking, I'm trying to cover water to try to find, try to actually see fish. In that process, throwing a wacky worm is my favorite thing. I mean, I'm going to throw it, up ahead of the boat. I'm going to be throwing it at targets and fishing it, as I go along. The thing I said with that, I'm going to be fishing it as I go along. It is a cast, let it sink, probably fish the bait that far, reel it in and make another cast. This isn't a cast and I'm trying to retrieve, It's not like I'm throwing a swim jig or I'm throwing a swim bait or something like that where I'm trying to fish the bait back to the boat. That wacky worm, it's a target-oriented cast. So there's a stump, there's a dock post, there's a clump of grass, there's whatever. I'm throwing, I'm letting it sink. I'm fishing it all the while I'm looking as I'm trolling, and I nearly troll to my bait, and then I pick it up and I throw it at the next target. So that's kind of the way that looks. I'm not sitting there going so slow on the trolling motor. I'm fishing a wacky worm halfway back to the boat. That's not what I'm doing at all. And then the other one, once I have located a fish, so say I'm going along with a wacky worm, boom, right there's a bed, there's a decent fish on it, I've marked it, come back around. I'm probably going to throw that wacky worm at it first, just because it is a very high percentage bait for me. It's high percentage that the fish are going to bite it, for one. It's high percentage that if a fish bites that and I do a decent job of hooking him, I'm going to land him. It's weightless. Obviously I've got a VMC weedless Nico hook on there, something that I catch the vast majority of fish that bite. I hook them well with that and I don't lose them. So it's a very high percentage bait. Again, we're fishing for fish that are not really trying to eat our bait necessarily. They're just trying to get it out of their bed. So oftentimes when they pick it up, they're not fully engulfing this thing way back in their crushers. They're oftentimes literally picking it up and just trying to move it off. So it's not like a lot of the fish you're going to catch have fully engulfed your bait. They've just got it barely in their mouth. So something that's high percentage, like a wacky worm, is what I'm going to try to catch those fish on first. So my first cast or two, again, oftentimes going to be with a wacky worm. Going to see how the fish reacts. But hey, that's weightless. It's slow. It's not honestly very intrusive. It's not something that's going to really aggravate a fish into biting if the fish isn't being extremely defensive to start with. So make a couple casts with that. Maybe the fish is really hot. Boom, he bites. I catch him. We move on. If not, if that fish is just kind of, he's staying in the bed, but he's not nosing down on that wacky worm, he's not getting real aggressive, that's when I'm going to completely shift gears and I'm going to get aggressive at that point in time. And I'm going to go with something that does have some weight on it, something that I can fish a lot faster for one, and something that I can, really try to aggravate that fish into biting. And something that I have used over the years and used in that underwater video we did, bed fishing a few years ago, and part of what I used at Lake Palestine to win in that heavy hitters event was a Tokyo rig, and a Tokyo rig with a little swim bait on the back of it. And that, I like that Tokyo rig because it sits like that on the bottom. My bait is suspended up off the bottom just a little bit, just enough to give it a very natural look. It's not like a Texas rig where it's going to be sitting right down on the bottom or something. It's going to be up off the bottom just a little bit. And it just makes it a very, very natural look. And it's with that Tokyo rig and that wide gap, it's weedless. I can fish it in and around cover. And it still does a pretty good job of hooking the fish on it. This is something that I'll actually try to not always catch the fish on. I'll use this as an aggravation technique. And if I get the fish mad enough at this, a lot of times I'll go back and drop the wacky worm back in there and try to catch them on that. But if this is the only thing they'll react to, then that's what I'm going to try to catch them on. But yeah, that Tokyo rig is a really, really good way with that little swim bait on it to get those fish mad. And a big part of that is, I call it like rapid fire pitching. I'm gonna, so I've got that fish there. I've got my raptors down. I've threw my wacky worm at it a time or two. It's not showing enough interest in it, so I pick up the Tokyo rig. Okay, I'm gonna pitch it in there, pitch it just beyond the bed, and kind of see what that fish does. If the fish is sitting there, say he's 90 degrees to me, I pitch it in there and the fish turns, looks at the bait, so he's looking away from me now at this point. And I'll pull the bait into the bed, and that fish just stays locked on it. And the closer you get it, the angle of that fish changes. You pull it in, and he's more like this. That's what you want. When that's happening, when that fish is going more nose down, and the bait's not even quite in the bed yet, you're probably pretty close to making that fish bite. Okay, different scenario. You pitch it up there, fish is like this. Your bait hits right outside the bed. Maybe the fish doesn't, he sees it, but he doesn't even acknowledge it. He's just kind of chilling, just doing his thing. You pull it closer. Maybe he moves over this way a little bit. You pull a little closer, maybe he swims out of the bed. Then I'm just going to let it sit. So if my bait's not if I've not gotten quite to the bed yet and the fish is left, I'm gonna leave my bait over there. I'm gonna leave it over there and I'm gonna watch that fish. I'm gonna watch. Then when it gets back, about the time it enters the bed, I'm gonna make my bait known again. I'm gonna jiggle it enough to where that fish has to acknowledge the fact that my bait is there. And it's gonna do one of two things. It's either gonna come on in the bed because this bait is moving, this intruder is moving closer to the bed, or it's gonna just bolt on through there and kick out again. If it does that, your odds are probably not real good of catching that fish. But if it just keeps easing onto the bed as I'm made it acknowledge me, then I feel like I've got something I can work with here. And as I bring that in, I'm going to just kind of evaluate that fish, just continually evaluate what that fish is doing. And the rapid fire part of that, of what I was talking about, once I've got it into the bed, I'm halfway done at that point. Once I've crossed the halfway point of the bed, my chance of catching that fish is actually probably less than half. Like the coming towards the bed and the first half of the bed, that's where most of your strikes happen. When you're across the halfway point and you're leaving it, you're getting away from your chance of catching one at that point in time. So as I'm pulling in, I'm watching, I'm kind of evaluating. I get to that over halfway point. If that fish isn't just really hot on my bait, I get it back out of there and I get it right back in there just as fast as I possibly can, okay? Is there a chance that fish would have followed it and bit? Yeah, there's a chance. But my chance is way better if I get it back out and get it right back in there and start coming through that better part, that, you know, higher percentage zone again versus coming on out to the outside. So that's a big part of that, of doing that really quickly and just watching that fish. If it stays in there, if it's staying right in that bed, I'm gonna fish it through there really quick. And after just 2 or 3 pitches, if that fish hasn't nipped at it, I'm gonna start hitting that fish with my bait. Like somewhere towards the, you know, front half of him. I don't want to hit him right on the tail. I feel like hitting them from kind of midsection back spooks them more. But if you hit that fish on the side of the face or, you know, something like that, if you bump that fish with your bait, and this is weedless, so I should have very, very little chance of accidentally hooking that fish. If you're bumping that fish with your bait towards the front half of that fish, they get really aggravated really fast. But you got to do it quick. You got to do it fast. If you bump that fish, I'm gonna twitch it down there. I'm gonna bump that fish, and I'm gonna pull the bait out, and I'm gonna pitch it right back in there. I'm not gonna bump that fish and then drop it and hope that fish turns back around and eats it. I want to pull it back out, get it back in there, and then pull it back in, because oftentimes that fish is gonna turn around then, and that's when it's gonna come hit it. So I can't stress enough how quick that process should be. Like, it's not a deal where you're waiting on that fish to bite. You are literally making that fish bite. It should be a really, really quick process. And again, if it's a fish that I maybe have had some trouble with getting a bite, I'll try to get it really, really aggressive on that swim bait oftentimes. And then if possible, I'll have a couple of different things rigged up. I'll have that wacky worm handy. But if this is all that it's showing any aggression to whatsoever, oftentimes I'm going to have a Texas rig with a sticko, like a 4-inch sticko worm, maybe in a pink, something that's very bright that I can see. You know, maybe a white bomb crawl, something that's very, you know, something I can see as soon as that bait disappears that I know to set the hook. Because again, that Tokyo rig with this big wide swim bait, and it's not super, super soft, it's pretty good about landing them, but I will lose some fish on it. So I'll get them really aggravated with that and then drop a Texas rig back in there that is very high percentage that I can hop and get that kind of reaction bite out of, and oftentimes pick them back up that way. So yeah, it's really about having 2 or 3 rods there ready. The wacky worm for just fishing and catching some of those ones that are, you know, really easy to get to bite. The Tokyo rig to really aggravate the ones that are you know, just not wanting to mess with anything else, and another cleanup kind of Texas rig, high percentage deal that you can go back and really clean them up with. So hope this helps you out there. Trying to understand a little bit when you're seeing those fish that are on the bed, discern which ones are the ones that are catchable, and a little bit of techniques for how you can do that, you know, the ways to get them to bite. But really 2 or 3 baits, man, you don't need a whole bunch of different stuff. You got 2 or 3 different things. Should be all you need to go catch those bedfish this spring. So hope y'all wear them out.